we're calling I Can't Breathe, and it's still about participation and inclusion. Maybe could move to the next slide, please. Before we start talking about the session, let's just find out who we've got and where you are. We've got one hello from Germany. Please just put your name and where you are right now in the chat box. Goli from Iran, Basil from Pune. Oh, I'm going to be struggling to keep up. India, several. South Africa, several. Hungary, Dubai, Scotland, Jordan, Taiwan, India, China, India again, Germany. Russia, Romania, Serbia. A few more in India. Namaste, Chetna. Thank you. Okay, another one in Serbia. That's great. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. So welcome everybody, and the aim for this session is to enable participants to internalize the IAF core competence, to honor and recognize diversity, ensuring inclusivity. And those of you who know your core competencies, that one is core competence C2. So our aim was initially to do a session at the Istanbul conference, which hasn't happened, of course. But here we are online, doing a different version of what we would have done face-to-face. So my name is John Cornwell. I'm here in Mombasa in Kenya. I'm an IAF member. In fact, if I could just show my t-shirt, and you can see IAF on one side and Africa on the other side. I've been an IAF member for quite a few years, and I'm also a social inclusion facilitator. And that's really my passion. And one of the things we've realized is that at the moment, the world is engulfed in firstly, the COVID-19 pandemic, and then it's almost been overtaken in many places by the huge wave of racism protests, anti-racism protests that have been going on in many, many countries. And we'll talk a bit more about that, but that has actually caused us to reframe the session whilst we're still looking at the themes of participation and inclusion. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll hand over to Basil.
Okay, hello everybody and welcome to the session. My name is Basil Manning. I am based in South Africa. For many years now, I've been a facilitator and also trained lots of facilitators. But you will understand that being from South Africa and then having been in exile from my country for 25 years, I carry a lot of feelings about that. And I hope those feelings won't get in the way as we talk about this very, very, very important subject, which has hit us globally on most television screens as a result of the death of somebody who was murdered in our presence, with George Floyd being seen across the world shouting, "I can't breathe, let me breathe, please." So that's why we've chosen that particular subject for our session, to relate it to the, as John has already said, the second core value of the International Association of Facilitators, of which I'm also a member of the South African chapter. I'll show you two slides there, the "I Can't Breathe," which has become popular or well-known in the last few weeks after the death of George Floyd. But before that, the Black Lives value and matter has already been there, and this is just building on that particular theme. The left-hand slide is about a statue of a person who is who was involved in the slave trade, somebody called Edward Colston. He was a slave trader, honored with a statue in Bristol, where most of the slaves were shipped from, and two in the UK. And the anger in terms of this statue being pulled down, as other statues, including one of Churchill, being defaced in the UK, is about the anger that people feel about this issue, and that's why we chose the subject, I can't breathe, to link it to this core value. Next slide, please. Just to give you a quick idea of the journey that we're at the opening session now, where it says opening. We will then do some work on the I, and the I will relate to myself. And we're really going to help us all to look at the issue of, if it's about myself, can I own what is happening in the world today in terms of the challenge and the exposure of how pervasive and embedded in the structures of most of our societies racism is. And then we will go to can't, and we're going to use can't to look at the blockages, things within me as a facilitator, which stops me from actually dealing with the issue of racism very effectively. And then we want to go to the positive at the end and breathe. We're fundamentally saying that to breathe, you need oxygen. So we can ask the question, what kind of oxygen do we need to embed and include and inspire and get into our facilitation process, that we can actually be more effective in terms of tackling racism, and then we'll end up with where do we go from here. So that's the road that we will follow. John?
Okay, so thanks, Basil. This is the next slide, and we put up this quite well-known quote from Desmond Tutu. It's only part of it, actually. And it reads, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." And I know in facilitation, we talk a lot about the neutrality of the facilitator. I was in a fascinating webinar or online session with the IAF India group. I'm sure some of you were in that one as well, where we were looking at this whole issue of neutrality. And I think this statement really gives us a big dilemma and a big question mark as to, should we always be neutral? Or are there times where we need to really think about our values and issues of power and inequality and injustice, and think about where we really stand? So we're just throwing that out for you to think about, and thank you. There's an interesting comment from Chetna reminding us of Augusto Boal's famous book, The Theatre of the Oppressed. Some of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with that. Thanks for that reminder. So let's go to the next slide. And with that in mind, we're going to move to the first group work session. And we're looking at the I. We're looking at I as a person. And we're asking two questions, really. How does all this make you feel? And what does this mean for you as a facilitator? When you're aware of so much going on in the world today, there's a blog that I also run with a colleague looking at social inclusion issues. And we did a post, we've done several posts in the last few weeks, but we did one a few weeks before that, before the racism protests, looking at injustice in the time of COVID-19 and the amount of injustices that have come up, and inequalities have got worse in so many places. We looked at, we've seen rates of gender-based violence everywhere, just getting out of hand. We've seen basically marginalized and oppressed groups receiving even worse treatment than before. So with all of this in mind, and particularly the protests that we've been seeing that have been going on in so many countries, looking at, you know, which are really shaking the world order, I think. A famous historian, David Olusoga, in response to that statue that was pulled down, and some very conservative-minded people were saying, "Oh no, this is disrespecting history." And David Olusoga actually said, "No, this is actually making history." And you know, I believe we're at a moment where many things are changing in the world. This is quite a historic moment. So we're going to break into groups of how many, Tamara? How many per group, approximately?
We can have 6 or we can have 7. What do you prefer?
Six or seven per. Let's go for 7 per group.
7 per group, okay.
Approximately. Some will be a bit more, some will be a bit less. And we'd like you to think about these 2 questions. And we're going to give you 15 minutes in your groups to do that. We're then going to ask you another question after that. And so you're going to stay in the groups and answer all of the questions, but just concentrate on these for now. This is the I section. What we'd like you to do in your groups, the first thing, obviously, get to know each other a little bit and find somebody who can facilitate the discussion. Okay, I think many or all of us are facilitators, so this is a chance to experience some facilitation within a smaller group. And we'd like somebody else to act as the scribe, to take some notes, just the key points. And what we're going to do is share a link for Google Docs and ask you to enter the notes you've made in that. And we'll give you about 15 minutes, and then we'll ask you another question. If technology works well, myself and Basil will be coming around and spending a few minutes with each group. But otherwise, if we're all ready, I think we can go to the groups.
Yes, we are ready.
Basil, sorry.
We would suggest that for the first round, you say, at least introduce yourself, say your name and where you're from, and then how does all this make you feel? Maybe that would be the first round. And then for the second round, in the same group for the remaining time, you go to the, what does this mean for me as a facilitator, okay?
So we stay in the same groups for 30 minutes still, but just having 2 questions in the same group. Okay.
Yeah,
that's right.
There will be a further question.
Okay.
Yeah, after about almost 15 minutes, we'll share the next question.
Okay,
so,
I'm opening the rooms now.
All right.
Okay.
So if you're not familiar with this, you'll get an invitation to join a group. Just click on join.
Sorry, Golly.
Please, can we ask people to have their name, because I see some people that their name is not shown. Please, if you click on your name, you can rename it and have your name. If you like, you can have your the name of your country by it. But please have a name. Thank you.
Thank you, Golly. I forgot to mention that. Okay, so as John said, I'm opening the rooms, and then you will see that you are automatically going to some room. But don't worry, even if you are staying in the main room, I can still take you somewhere. So now we're recording again. So I will put back on the slides.
Okay. So welcome back, everybody. I see people are coming back slowly. I hope you enjoyed the discussions. And I suspect some of you felt that they could have gone on a lot longer, or maybe should have gone on a lot longer. And that's always the challenge with group work, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So can you go back to the previous one?
Yes.
Tamara? Yep, please. Okay, we just wait for others to come back. We've got about 20 people back, 25 now. So a few more seconds. If you look in the chat box, the Google Docs link is there. So those who offered to make some notes, if you don't mind, please go there and add in whatever you can from the session. Some of the things that that stood out for you, maybe per group, just 3 or 4 points for each question.
John, we've just arrived. Can you repeat again?
Yeah, sorry. I'm going to post the link again in the chat box. It's there several times now. But what we're asking is somebody from each group to go to that link and just type a few notes from the discussions you had, just some of the key points, maybe about 3 or 4 points from each group. That would be enough. And you can do that while we're continuing with the debrief. We wanted to get some kind of record of what people have discussed. So that would be really, really great if you can do that. I hope you can open the link and it works okay. But what we're also going to do is just take a few points from some of the different groups. So we're not going to go around every group, but just a few feelings. Maybe this one you could put in the chat box. Let's just see what some of the feelings are in answer to the first question. And it doesn't have to be your own feeling, something that came out in the discussion. Let's hear some of the feelings that came out. We need more empathy. That's the first one from Jacqueline. Anger from Kata. Let's give people time to think a little bit. Against my value, again from Kata. Thank you. Sadness from Shada. Group 3, we got frustrated, anger, shame, and furious.
Fear.
I could be afraid. Still happening, question mark. Horror and optimism about what could happen, what could change, I think. We may feel, however, as facilitator, important not to show. I see. Okay. Anti-humanity, misused, suffocation, discrimination. This was from group 5. Okay, thank you for sharing. And hopefully we'll get some of these in the Google Docs as well. Let's go to the next question. What does this mean for you as a facilitator? What does this mean for you as a facilitator? Maybe a couple of people can unmute themselves and share. Previous slide, Tamara. That's it. What does this mean for you as a facilitator? A couple of comments about feeling disturbed. Sometimes we show it with the body language. Yes, please go ahead, Shada.
Okay, as I mentioned to my group, yeah, my reaction to that question is I need to learn a bit more objectivity around this kind of situation in order to be a good facilitator. Yeah, I was in a situation earlier today and I just I exploded. I didn't explode. I was very direct with the people that I was with. And I said, this is not a time to escape. It's not a time to say things like, oh, let's not talk politics. You know what? Everything is political and we must talk politics. However, to sum up, I feel like if I were to learn more objectivity and learn some strategies and put some poignant questions to people under circumstances like that, I could do more towards change rather than emoting.
Thank you, Shada. Thank you for sharing.
Shada, please talk more about objectivity when it comes to issues of racism and discrimination.
It's, Basil, for people like us who have grown up, you know, I mean, I've grown up with gross racism and sexism. So it's very hard to be objective about it. However, maybe what I'm saying is that when I encounter people and I know that they're trying to escape the situation, or, you know, one of the things that I react to very badly is when people say, oh, what can you do? You know, that just like brings up this big monster in me. And, you know, it's very difficult to countenance that. However, what I feel like if one learned to become more strategic and kind of reflect to people what they're saying, and also, you know, present things in a different light. So people start, because also when people say, what can you do? You should say there's actually a hell of a lot you can do. How about if you think about A, B, C, D? Yeah, I would prefer it if I could get to that sort of point. And I'm hoping that somewhere along the way through you and John, I will learn some of those, but also some of those strategies to use as a facilitator as well.
Thanks for that. I think it's insightful.
Thank you, Shada. Thank you. Maybe let's hear from somebody else in another group.
Sorry, John, since people don't have access to edit on Google Drive, is that okay if anyone who's interested share the ideas here in chat? It's okay.
Yes,
we can share our ideas in chat.
Yeah, okay, please. I think please share as much as you can in the chat, and what we'll do is save all of that and re-edit it. Obviously, what I thought I'd done, giving access to everybody who had the link, obviously didn't work, so let's do it another way. Sorry for that. But yeah, let's capture what we can, and I'm seeing a lot of stuff coming up in the chat box, which is great. Let's hear maybe from somebody else. What does this mean for you as a facilitator? And then we'll move to the
this is
next
Padma
question.
here, if I may share.
Please, Padma.
Yeah. So very specifically, there were this internal and external blocks with specific reference to racism is what you had put down.
Oh, you're on the
question.
block. That's fine. Just go ahead.
So
Yeah.
most of what we discussed in the group was the internal part in terms of, as a facilitator, what do we feel and how do we think and so on and so forth. So towards the end, we didn't have enough time, but that's another thing that we wanted to discuss, that if it is external, for example, certain behavior of one of the participants that tends to, racist kind of thinking or behavior, then how do we respond? Or if there is a majority view that is kind of overpowering a smaller minority, then as facilitator, what kind of role do we have? If we have to bring inclusive, situation, create a space of safety, psychological safety, then do we just stand and watch as we find overpowering majority trying to silence a minority? So that's another thing that we were, at least I was thinking about.
Thank you very much, Padma. And I think we've already moved to the next slide. I think if you can move on to there, Tamara, that can't. I'm just going to read a couple of quite interesting comments here from, now I've lost it, from Joanna. She says, the challenge is to find the balance between being neutral and remaining authentic and true to ourselves. Being neutral feels somehow false. And Celeste says that she's agreeing with Biliana. We are humans, have our own stories and experiences. We need to stand up if something is in the way of our inner values. Okay, thank you for sharing. So maybe let's hear a couple of other people talking about some of the blocks from either for themselves or within the group. Yeah, Basil, sorry.
If I can just come in, going around the groups, I heard two loads of blockages in two kind of sections. One was external stuff, and I think Shada made a reference to that in relation to the first question. There are things which block us outside of ourselves in terms of how other people are responding even to our stance in relation to anti-racism or challenging racism. But then there are a lot of and I think most of the things came out, blockages within myself, my own values. Somebody used the term unconscious bias, the things within me, and then my lack of information and things like that. And I think those, we need to recognize that there may be two sets of blockages, and we can relate to both of those in terms of what stops me from really being effective in my facilitation.
Thanks, Baz. Yeah. Okay, and Chetna's saying a block could be the method or modality itself, like the process or theatre methodologies we follow or adopt. And she's been talking a lot about methods of theatre. Maybe that's something you could share a little bit more about at some point. But that's really helpful. Would anybody else like to talk a bit more about some of the blocks? What blocks me from being an inclusive facilitator?
Yeah, I can say something about the external blockage, especially. Yeah, as a facilitator, we can discuss and agree with things, but also it's important how it's going to make the change, especially if the organization doesn't have the right culture, doesn't have the right policies, or doesn't, or the government and things. We really need to think about all those things as externals blockage as well, because it's going to stop to make the decisions, even though if we have the decision, but if something isn't changed in the upper level, it's not going to change, it's going to stay the same. It's going to be like going around in a circle. You start from somewhere, you're going around and around. But if the government or the policy or some of the other things in a strategic level doesn't change or won't change, then how the facilitator makes the changes? I mean, during the meeting, okay, it's going to be discussed. People will tell their views, they're going to agree to things, but then external blockage is I think it's the main issue, not just a small group of people. Yeah, what I'm thinking. Thank you, John.
Sure, thank you. So what I'm hearing there is a sense of powerlessness, that even, you know, what can a few individuals do if the structural blocks are so big and so massive? Yeah, and that's a very significant block, I agree. Thank you for sharing. Maybe let's have one more person and then we're going to move on to the next question. Celeste says we are part of the system. If we change in our subsystem, maybe it can be viral. So that's giving us a clue as a way forward. Would anybody else like to share about blocks?
Yeah. So the very reaction of facilitator after looking at that particular situation can be a blockage as well. The way a facilitator would react, and the processing is very, very important, because the information which is being passed on, and of course listening to both the parties, and listening to the stakeholders, and so social dialoguing is what can help an facilitator to be more inclusive. Sure. Otherwise, yeah,
thank you, Roshan.
Yeah.
And great, you're taking us to our last question, and you know, I think it's worth saying, and we'll say it again towards the end, that we just want to get a flavour of what's happening for people as facilitators in relation to this current situation. But let's move on to the next slide, where we're going to look at the breathe aspect. And if you were here earlier on, you would have heard Basil talking about breathe as in oxygen. So we've used that word oxygen. So this is the question, and we're going to put you back into small groups, but different ones this time. And the question is, what oxygen do we need in order to design and facilitate processes which promote racial justice and equality? Okay, so what oxygen do we need? What new ideas and inspiration do we need as facilitators that will help us to deal with some of these blocks and really design and facilitate processes that are about promoting racial justice and equality? So a big question, you know, and we don't expect you to have all the answers in 10, 15 minutes, but we're going to put you back in groups with a similar number, I think. And we're going to give you another 15 minutes to discuss and think through this question. And again, well, as the Google Docs doesn't seem to be working, so we'll ask you to put this in the chat box at some point. So it means anybody can do that, but as long as somebody from each group does that, that will be great. So Tamara, if you can please put people back into the groups when you're ready.
So in 15 minutes, they will be automatically returned back, right?
Oh, fine. So 15 minutes. And again, find somebody to facilitate or find a good way to facilitate the discussion. And we'll also be moving around, myself and Basil will, just to see how things are going.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go.
We'll go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
you can put the slide back on
Yes.
breathe. There,
Yes.
the one that says breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And we're pretty much on time, actually. Not doing too
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah, I think we are fine.
Okay.
When I share the screen, you don't see me opening the breakout rooms or chat or anything. No, you just see my screen.
No, just
Okay.
see the screen. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is my paranoia. Sorry. I'm not sure if this is visible or not. I rather
Don't
check.
yeah. We're all learning all the time, but this is it's been a crash course in online facilitation for everybody, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which I think is great, because I before this I would never imagine that I will do facilitation online. This is really total breakthrough for me.
Yeah,
But okay.
sure. Yeah, it's like forced into the situation. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, welcome back. I think most people are back now. Well, I heard some fantastic ideas, and I heard a lot of energy, and clearly there was a lot of oxygen in those groups. The other thing I noticed is that people were a lot quicker to get organized and have a facilitator. I'm sure if there was a third round, it would be even quicker, but unfortunately there isn't. Anyway, just like before, maybe you could share some points in the chat box, if you don't mind. And, you know, let's hear from a few different people, some great ideas that came up from, you know, that talk about the new ideas and the inspiration that we're looking for. So please jump in if you're ready. Yeah, Archana.
Yeah, I'm ready from the, my name is Archana, I'm based in Pune. I think we were part of group 5. So basically what we discussed as a group that, you know, as a facilitator, there are so many values that we all carry. And it is the, whatever we see at the surface is actually the behavior which emerges from deep within a lot of different belief systems and values that all of us carry. So our that we have grouped before and who we are going to be working with, what kind of values they carry as an organization, as an individual, what cultures they carry, and what their consensus in our ways of working. Certain things as a facilitator that we all carry is, you know, making sure everybody is heard, there is a mutual respect for everyone, and we can also share the IAF code of ethics and, you know, values that we have, that this is what we promote, and getting a buy-in from the group, and also asking the group what would make the group as a group, you know, this whole meeting very successful, and what is it that they would like to add on to the ways of working, and creating a code of conduct in that group itself, which is basically nothing but values in action. So this is how we can, you know, promote the justice and equality in our facilitation.
That's great.
And then
Thank you,
respect
Archana.
being anything that is missed from my group, I encourage, you know, my buddies to please go ahead and share. Some of the points that
Thank you
also
very
came
much,
up that
Archana.
we should promote some success stories of, you know, these kind of values in action of fairness and neutrality, and what benefits it has to those organizations, and what results it brought, and what outcomes came up, so that it becomes more and more encouraging.
Great. Thank you very much, Archana. And if you don't mind, please put some of those points in the chat box as well. But yeah, real emphasis on values, and you know, looking at the IAF values, inclusivity is there. You know, it's one of the core values. It should be fundamental to everything we do as facilitators. Semin has put writing and creating house rules, code of conduct, understanding people's needs. Jawad has put the need to build a shared understanding of what racism is all about. Yeah, understanding people's needs, and that learning styles are not the same for everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, John, may I just brief what our group
Please
talked
do, yeah.
about?
Yeah,
Please go ahead.
we started talking about how important it is to have inspirational stories and at the same time provide time to debate. And while debating, we then learn from the people, and we move from a situation where we don't listen only we don't listen to judge, but also to understand. And by doing this, we go into a situation where we do less profiling and less categorization, building on mutual respect. And on top of it, then we create the conditions to contracting to something and build on our rules on how to work together, how to live together, how to socialize together. And this moves us into a process of institutionalizing new ways of looking at these specific situations about racism and all that.
Great. Thank you, Celeste. Yeah. So hearing people's stories, putting people's stories at the heart of everything. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I share on behalf of my group?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Joanna. You want to?
Joanna, then Jawad. Thank you.
So yeah, we also related to storytelling, story sharing in our group. And we have recorded all this on the whiteboard. So if I kindly ask you to stop sharing your screen, I could share ours. And then we would have not only the spoken word, but also the written one. Is it okay? Otherwise, I can simply read the...
Let's see if that works.
So...
Jawad, do you want to go in while we get to do the technical stuff? Hopefully the screen sharing will go on, and then we'll come back to Joanna.
Do you want me to share on behalf of my group right now?
Yeah,
okay, so we've talked about many different points here. So we talked about the need to, arrive to the best possible outcome always, and this requires, including as much voices as possible. We need to avoid also coming into, such processes without prejudgments, predetermined decisions. We need also to create containers for change. We need to find allies and to do some networking. Partly this was also your idea, John, also. And we also need to create the space to be able to work collaboratively and imply the principle of inclusivity here. And we also need to be clear on what constitutes racism, being grounded also, open up to opinions, listen attentively, build trust, and develop connections, shared understanding on what social justice is, the need to be able to express and to be heard, welcoming ideas and feedback, hearing all the voices, better opportunities also to talk about people's own aspirations as how they want to achieve social justice also. And lastly, someone in my group brought an interesting point here. He's talking about the health of the facilitator himself. Facilitators need to be healthy, well-fed, so they can actually contribute to social justice. It's also about it's the facilitator's health. So yeah, this is what everybody in my group have shared. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jawad. And I would like to add the facilitator, him or herself. But thank you for sharing. Joanna, where are we with yours? Aha, we've got the screen now. Wonderful. Thank you. Maybe don't take us through everything, but if you could highlight one or two of the really key points, and the rest of it we'll be reading. Joanna, you're on mute.
So when we have a look at the bottom line, we immediately see that also stories played a very important role in our oxygen brainstorming. So really stories from different cultural contexts, so that, when we ask questions, when we encourage people to share their stories, to share their points of view, we also encourage them to examine the point of view that is opposite to their own, and then really focus on searching for similarities and not focusing on differences all the time. And also to encourage the participants to empathize with the other group. So this process to encourage the synergies and synergic solutions. I'm pretty sure that what is really important is also to offer spaces that people can withdraw a little bit, that they can also relate to their own energy level, and also to self-reflect what has actually happened. Because, you know, even if they go through this experience, it would remain at this emotional level just with them. However, when they have time to self-reflect, then it would be also an enrichment, because we don't actually learn from the experiences, we learn from the self-reflection on these experiences. So this is also something that came in our discussion, especially, you know, the very, very big challenge, and also the biggest chance above all, to establish the psychological safety for all of this.
Great, thank you so much, Joanna, and thanks to everybody who shared. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do it, but Joanna, if you could try and find a way of putting that in the chat box, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, sure.
That would be really appreciated. Just to say, we're running on by a few minutes. I hope that's okay with people. We won't go any later than, well, it's 5 o'clock where I am, the top of the hour. I'm sure we're going to be another 5-10 minutes probably. So bear with us if you can. And I'll hand over to Basil now.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on the point that Joanna made. I think it's a really important one. Assume as a facilitator that there will be people in your group that you're facilitating who will be into deep denial about the actual reality of racism that we're experiencing across the world right now, and you will continue as a facilitator. If people have not experienced that, if they've not been at the receiving end of it, by and large, they're going to say, but aren't you just imagining this? Does it really exist? Because I didn't experience it for myself, I don't make any sense of it. So be aware as a facilitator that there will be resistance, there will be denial, there will be people who will say, this is not a reality that we should even take into account. It does not exist. So I think we need to be aware of that as facilitators. And if we are going to make a positive contribution in terms of how we facilitate and how we actually promote and how we are inclusive, including on issues of racial justice and equality, that we have to be absolutely clear about what constitutes, as other people have said, what constitutes racism, how it expresses itself, how it is experienced, and how it impacts upon the lives of others. That's really fundamental.
Thanks, Basil. Let's go to the last slide then. And Basil, over to you. Or back to you.
I think one of the things that we say in workshops on social inclusion, and especially on racism, and sexism. I cannot take the blame for the ideology of white superiority. I was not there when it was started years and years ago. I wasn't even there when the ideology of male superiority was introduced and institutionalized and into the world and how we live and into every aspect of society. I can't take responsibility for that, but I can and I must take responsibility of how that has impacted upon me and how I function today, right? So we cannot unlive what happened in the past, right? But we can make sure in relation to how we behave that past is not relived again in the present. So this particular quote from Maya Angelou is very, very helpful to us, and I hope will be helpful to you in terms of your being able to face up to the reality of racism, but not dwelling on the past, look at the present reality and have the courage so that what happened in the past and what has resulted in all the pain that we talk about is not again repeated in the present. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Basil. We're moving towards the end of the session, and we thought we'd say thank you to you all in a few different languages. I hope some of you recognize some of the languages. By all means, share any comments in the chat box about the session. We're not going to do an evaluation as such, but there will be an evaluation of the whole facilitation festival, which Tamara is going to talk about just now. I'd like to thank everybody for participating. I hope that we can take this further, and those who've left their contacts will definitely pick up with you and see how we can move this forward. Just to let you know also, some of us who are here now are part of what we call the Social Inclusion Facilitators Special Interest Group, and these are some of the issues we're looking at there. So open invitation if anybody else would like to get involved with that, and I'm sure the group that comes out of this you know, we'll link closely with other facilitators there. What we're trying to do is very much say that social inclusion, justice, equality issues should be at the heart of what we're doing. You know, we believe in neutrality as facilitators, but we also believe that there are times when we really shouldn't be neutral. And as Desmond Tutu says, there are limits to neutrality, and we need to know where we stand on issues and use our power as facilitators and as individuals and as organizations in positive and productive ways. So, well, we've got Gaelic here as well, Morang Tang, that's great. And I saw Teshikura Ederim, and I was really hoping to be able to say that in person in Istanbul. But I'm happy we've been able to do this. So thank you very much. Basil, do you want to say a last word, and then we'll hand over to Tamara?
Just to say thank you. It is not an easy road, especially when it comes to issues of racism in the broader spectrum of social inclusion. It is one of the fundamental issues facing our countries. We may not be aware of it, and it may not be as overt as it is in other countries, but it is there. And we hope that some of you will see again and we can do some further work on this. But thank you very much for coming to this session. Cheers, bye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both, John and Basil, for this excellent and very, I would say, moving session, because a lot of emotions were started, and also I think the people started to think much more about some points that you mentioned. As a final thing, just some technical things. First of all, thank you for being with us the whole day. I don't know, I'm already seeing some faces that I saw in the opening session and the previous sessions, which is great. This is exciting journey for all of us, and in order to be better and better each time that we come together, we prepared a Google Doc form for you. It's in chat. Please take it with you and keep it, because you will be able to fill in after each session that you actually attend. You will be able to rate the session or to give feedback also for the sessions, and then we will wrap up everything for everybody. There are also, I think Rena earlier shared some social media links. Well, we are inviting you to come on Twitter. Here it is again. Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram, and please do a lot of promotion and sharing your thoughts and ideas with us as well through these media. The final thing is that tomorrow we are starting 12:30 Turkish time. I don't know what is what is the transition. Set time is 11:30 Central European time. So I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. And we will be also talking about this a live facilitation festival that we hopefully will be able to hold in in September. Kata is here, Central Eastern European countries chapter will be the main organizer of that festival with the very, of course, support of IAF and everything. So please follow the webpage that we already promoted through this online festival for further information. And thank you again very much and see you soon. See you tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you
Thank
very
you very
much.
much. Thank
you.
you.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Hoşça kal John.
We are having different languages even, which is great.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.